Hello, trading is closed on October 9th, 2020. We'll do our disclaimer, then go over our calls. It's my trading plan for Monday. Trade at your own risk, no guarantee it's right. Here's how to contact me. I've had a few people who post replies to my videos, and they tell me about these wonderful people who make all kinds of money for their customers. If anyone's listening who posts those things, I'm going to block you and delete the comments, so save yourself the time and the trouble. If you want to publicize your service, pay for an ad. Okay, back to business. Here was what we said. We said ideally we should gap over the high for the advance to continue. That's what happened. These are the calls for next week. We had the early low today. We're going to get an early low Monday. Here's your early low. During the day, MEJT gave an ultimate sell signal and a sell signal in this big advance, and they obviously worked. Didn't stop the market from having a good day nonetheless. Well, the big announcement we made yesterday is I think the market's going higher. See if we can explain what's going on. And the question is to be or not to be. That is the question. There's something in technical analysis called a to be top. You have the old high. You break through the old high. It's a false break, and immediately you undercut the old high. That's a negative formation. You really shouldn't squiggle over it like this, but I have a forgiving nature. When you continue down, I was looking for a big drop like this. Well, that's not it. So something else is going on. This is normally a pretty good pattern, and when it fails, the rally continues as a rule, and you overtake this high. Doesn't mean it has to happen Monday, but this was a good setup for a tank, and there's no tank, and that means higher prices are usually going to print in the intermediate to long term. Shoot. Well, so the bottom line is this count might not be the right count, and I'm going to have to change it. It breaks no rules, and if we drop again from here, I'll be surprised, but it's not the only way to count this, as I've said. And I think we have to entertain the notion that instead of this being wave red B, that so far we've had an A and a B, and we could have another strong wave C up. Looks kind of funny, but it doesn't break any of the rules. So we'll keep that as the alternate count, but we might have to change it. Now, it's probably not escaped your notice that today's high is right at a major trend line. And usually when you rally to a trend line, but not through it, the trend line wins. But everything else is pretty positive here. And so I think gapping up over this trend line, while not forced, not required, really is in keeping with the rally we've had. Well, Monday's pattern has the early low. Doesn't mean you won't gap up. Typically, it's a rally day with a high in the final hour. Early weakness usually is followed by more weakness in the days to come, even if you rally the rest of the day. It's a bit negative. We gapped up, hit a higher high, closed under multiple highs. The bulls really should have a gap and promptly overtake today's high to avoid lower prices from printing. That's the ideal situation. Usually, if they don't, it doesn't mean we have to close lower, but if we don't gap over this high, we should trade lower. That's what usually happens. But don't forget, we did hit a real significant trend line at the end. If we don't gap over it, usually the trend line wins. And if you don't gap over it and you break through, usually you're going to retrace to that trend line. Now we have a number of secondary indicators that are extended, and if we reverse from these levels, that's credible. But that hasn't happened yet, and I'm not going to predict it. If it happens, it happens. The failure of the potential 2B top to hold implies a new all-time high should print, and usually it doesn't take all that long. So Monday's pattern, look for the early low. Typically it's a positive pattern. You have a rally day Friday. Typically you are going to carry through Monday, ideally by gapping over this high. There's always a caveat. There could be some news event, something else going down. If you gap down smartly, not only is the whole idea killed, but if you gap down smartly, I can explain a top in this area. I'm not predicting that, but I don't predict what happens overnight, and particularly over weekends. But if that happens, you wouldn't be obliged to recover all that quickly. And that is today's call.